Alright, so the next thing that we're going to look at is the next grace note in the series of grace notes. Now before I begin, I just want to address the obvious elephant in the room here. There has been a considerable gap since the last video was posted in this series, and I do apologise for that. Essentially, lockdown, COVID, everything was getting rather desperate. So as soon as work was able to be done, I had to go and seize that. And of course, I just got wrapped up in all of that. So anyway, in the intervening time, new chanter, new glasses, considerably greyer hair in the last 2 years, but you know, that's what happens. Anyway, so I should stress, if you have not yet mastered your scale, up and down, and you have not yet mastered the fine art of playing the high G grace note, then you should go back and you should revisit those. If you are sufficiently confident though, we shall progress. Now, in bagpipe music, I'm sure I've said this before, but you find there's a tendency for the high G grace note to be the primary grace note. So a tune will usually begin with a G grace note. There are some exceptions, and I'll explain that in a second, or a bar or a part. Obviously, the exceptions to this rule are when we physically can't play the G grace note. So if, for instance, your anacrusis, I should say, is a lead-in note. It is what you hear at the beginning of a bagpipe performance when the piper first strikes up, and then you'll hear a note that is played first, and then the melody starts. Normally E. Sometimes though you'll get a high A or a high G at the beginning. So in that case, when it's physically impossible to play a high A, it will usually revert to the next grace note in the series. Now, the three primary grace notes, and I'm going to call them that because generally speaking, these three grace notes form the main ones used for melody and for phrasing. So the next one in the series is the D grace note. And much in the same vein as how you played the high G grace note, we're only opening the hole that will produce that sound. We're not playing D as a normal note as we would in this manner. We're simply going to lift the top finger on the bottom hand. Again, if you're playing it the other way around with your right hand at the top, this will be your index finger on your left. But for the majority of people, it's going to be the index finger on your right hand, and that is the D grace note. For obvious reasons, the highest note that you can play a D grace note onto is going to be C. Okay? This one can be a bit tricky for people because of the way, again, going back to the beginning of this video series, the way your hand works, sometimes fingers just don't want to either move independently or they don't want to move as a group. It can take a bit of practice. And also there's often a temptation to play this grace note, as I've seen in some people when I've been teaching them, as a tendency to move all the fingers as one sometimes. We don't really want to do that. So we'll explain this though. It again is going to work in the same fashion as the high A grace note. So the goal here is that when we play the grace note, we're opening and closing the hole as quickly as possible. Of course, without sacrificing sounding the grace note itself. So like this. Okay, if you're not confident or comfortable playing at that speed yet, don't worry. The trick is really just to get used to lifting that finger up and down by itself. So the goal here is we want to play this moving from one note to the next with the grace note in between. We don't want to go back to the original note and then move, and I'll show you the difference. So if we go from low G to low A, sorry, with a D grace note in between, we want it to sound like this. Not this. That's totally wrong, of course, unless the music has asked you to do that specifically. I'm not asking you to do that. I want you to play up the scale using the D grace note to get between notes. So, like I said, now, personally, I find moving from B to C with the grace note is actually easier in this case to lift both the index and middle finger at the same time as I put the pinky down, because this finger is going to come up anyway to play C. So by doing that at the same time, all I need to do then is just bring the index finger back down again, and that will resolve us back to C. The reason why I'm suggesting doing that rather than lifting the D finger and then swapping them round is that there's more of a chance of making a crossing noise that way, so you don't want to hear B in between. All right, so again, take your time with that. There's no need to get that up to full speed just yet. We want to practice it going back down as well. And then we can mix it up. We can go from low G up to C. And so forth. There is an exercise that is detailed in the description of this video for you to go and look at. This is a really important grace note to get right, because it actually forms a part of a move in bagpipe playing called a tacham. We're not going to learn the tacham just yet, but it's really important to develop the dexterity of that movement so that you can play the tachams clearly and cleanly when the time comes. So go away and practice that now.